Welcome back, guys. Last video I did was partially a preview of the driver advisory board for fall, October 30th of 2019. And so therefore, good chance to do a bit of a recap of what we talked about, some of the things that came out of that, and just my general thoughts on DAB and kind of nice opportunity here because we're not going to meet again until late winter, February of 2020, which sounds, it's always weird when we change years, but going from 2019 out to 2020 sounds like it's the future. I mean, maybe it's just me. Anyway, so what I did was I decided to grab, this is our two-sided, not our agenda, but this is kind of an exploded view of our agenda. And so to explain how driver advisory board works, it's a 2-day affair. It's really a day and a half affair. But day one is an afternoon meeting, and there is a facilitator, independent, not prime employee, consultant basically, but he serves as the facilitator for the driver advisory board meetings. And the way day one works is it is just drivers, and it is just this facilitator, this independent consultant, outside employee, non-prime employee, whatever you want to call this person. So we get together on day one. In this case, it was a Tuesday, and driver advisory board for the year that I've been involved has changed days of the week. It's been on a Friday, it's been on a Monday, it's been on a Wednesday. But always the day before, there is this afternoon meeting, and it's broken up into two segments. There's the, and it's because of the size and the number of drivers involved. The first segment of day one is only reefer drivers. Refrigerated division at Prime is the largest division, 5,000 plus 6,000 drivers, somewhere around that number. I don't know the exact figure. So obviously the largest membership of the DAB on the driver's side is in the refrigerated division. So they get together, meet with a facilitator, and the whole point is everybody that's on the board brings topics to this day one meeting. It's kind of a pre-meeting meeting. And talks about, well, what would you like to see addressed at the DAB? The second portion of that day one is tanker, flatbed, and we do have one intermodal driver who is part of DAB. So they break it up so that the majority of the group is in that first segment, and then the second segment is a smaller group of drivers. Currently 2 tanker drivers. There's, I forget the number of flatbed drivers, 4 or 5 flatbed drivers, and there's currently 1 intermodal driver who's on DAB. So we get together in that second portion of day one. And then the next day, the way DAB is set up is there are presentations from various members from in-house. And so not only is driver advisory board drivers getting together to talk, but it is members of in-house. And when I say in-house, and so, it's the expanded, all of the topics brought up on day one are then combined in our agenda and put into where they belong in under whoever's department. So, there's an introduction, obviously. There's a state of an industry, which is kind of the general U.S. economy and how it affects trucking, and our sales team is involved in that portion. That's focused on reefer. We talk about tanker and flatbed and intermodal a little bit later on. Safety has their own segment, payroll, maintenance in the road assist department, operations, and this is where we talk about tanker and flatbed and intermodal sales, is during the operations department segment. The training program, success leasing, the information technology IT department. And so then everything that's brought up gets put into a segment You know, if I bring a topic that has been mentioned to me by a driver, where does that fit? Is it a mechanical issue with the trailers? Well, then that goes into, the segment here that I talked about, maintenance and road assist as an example. So then that would be, under that particular point, so that the pre-meeting gets filtered into where it fits within the actual meeting. And those topics all get addressed. And if there's not an immediate solution, and a lot of times there's an immediate solution, and I'll go back to one of the first DABs that I went to. Live loaded calls are something we don't deal with in the tanker division. And if you don't know what a live loaded call is, the reefer division, a lot of time, once they're loaded, so I've explained before, once we're loaded and we're ready to leave, we send a message in that has a lot of the details. It has their your bill of lading number, has the weight, number of pieces. In our case, it's liquid. It's one piece of liquid. Maybe 48,000 pounds of one piece. But when you're dealing with produce, as an example, they need to know, and ours has a temperature as well. Let's say it's 97 degrees for soybean oil, 48,000 pounds. There's one piece, and here's your bill of lading number. You picked up a trailer, you dropped a trailer. All that information is involved in your loaded call as you leave where you got loaded. The reefer division has what are called live loaded calls, and for that they have to make a phone call to a department that handles those calls. And the reasons for that are their refrigerated stuff tends to be a lot more temperature sensitive. The temperature sensitive stuff that we haul is the warmer stuff, 160 degrees, and it has to stay above 155, otherwise it starts to solidify. But on the reefer side, their temperature fluctuations are much, much smaller. And as an example, it's 30 to 31 degrees is what you have to keep a particular product at, and it has to stay frozen. And obviously, if it gets to 32, 33 degrees, it starts to thaw, and you're dealing with a frozen product. You're going to have a liability claim because the product didn't stay frozen. Similarly, if it's a product that's not supposed to freeze, if it's supposed to stay at 34, 35, 36 degrees, and all of a sudden the reefer unit, and if you don't know the difference what a reefer trailer versus a box trailer, drive-in, look at a box trailer driving down the highway, and on the front there is a hump, and that's basically a refrigeration unit on the front of a reefer trailer. A lot of them say Carrier, just off the top of my head, because that's a company that makes, Thermo King makes reefer units, and they have to be able to maintain the correct temperature. And because of the fact that you can have, say, 45,000 pounds of beef, and when you're talking about something like beef, if you ruin an entire trailer full of beef, that's very expensive. And you start thinking about how much you pay a pound for beef, and you've got 45,000 pounds and you freeze it and it's not supposed to freeze, and the company's going to file an insurance claim against Prime because you were supposed to run it at 35 and your reefer was set to 28. So that's why they had these live loaded calls. Just to go a little in depth, what I'm explaining is drivers were saying that they would get busy signals or get hung up on these live loaded calls, and they would have to continually call in until they could get through. And the IT department figured out that the settings were incorrect in their phone system, and that if there were more than 2 or 3 phone calls, that it automatically hung up, and it was resolved immediately. So to make a long story short, some things that the office staff, of course, just assumed that the phone was set correctly, but when you have everybody in the room, you have drivers, you have the IT department, you have the sales staff, and basically what happened was you had drivers saying, no, it will hang up on you. You had sales staff saying, well, it's not designed to do that, and you had the IT department who was able to then look up and say, oh yeah, it's set wrong, and it can be fixed. And that's what's great about the driver advisory board. Obviously, there are going to be things that are not able to be fixed immediately because there isn't an apparent solution that's that quick. But it's a good opportunity to get everyone in the room to talk about what are the problems, what are potential solutions, what can we look into to potentially solve these issues. So I don't really have anything specific from this particular meeting. It was a good opportunity, though. Once again, I continue to enjoy being able to serve in this capacity. If you are a prime driver and you are interested, there's always, people who have been on the board who, it's a 2-year position. So I've been through a year. I've got 1 year left on the DAB, and they'll be looking for another driver, I would assume, in about 6 to 9 months, who would be my replacement unless they want to ask me to continue. And on the reefer side as well, there's always turnover. Somebody who may have been on the board and may no longer be at prime, or there's people who are finishing up their 2 years. And so they do tend to take applications. So I'll again put the DAB website in there. Again, just because we're not meeting until February, you can still send questions into the driver advisory board. And on that website, there is a contact us feature, and it sends emails to every single person on the driver advisory board. And you can typically get answers. You can either get an answer immediately to something you may not know. It may be a simple question, and we get a lot of simple questions that are, why is this? And there's a simple answer that the driver just may not know about. And at the same time, maybe you have an idea. It's not always just a, hey, why does this work? You may have an idea and say, hey, why we should do this, or can Prime do this? And people have offered things. And a good example, we had an update at this point almost a month ago. The drop yard, this is a reefer drop yard in Denver, Colorado. Drivers wanted to be able to leave the facility without taking their truck with them, to be able to get an Uber, be able to walk to a different place outside the facility. And there was no way to exit the facility without asking someone to hit inside the building a button to open the gate, or handing your card to somebody outside to swipe on the outside. Well, because of a request to the driver advisory board, they installed a card swipe, and the card is the Prime driver ID, so that you can leave the yard. And that's something that happened because of the Prime driver advisory board. So if you have an option or a suggestion along those lines, those are certainly more than welcome as well. So again, I'll throw that into the description, the Prime driver advisory board website. Obviously, as I mentioned before, you can also send me emails. I will be glad to answer questions for you if you don't want to be public with them, although you certainly do get that opportunity to reach out to everyone if you do submit to the entire DAB, and it might be somebody else. And finally, if you are not a Prime driver currently and you do want to come, I'll throw that link in the description. Once again, if you do want to come, it'll take you right to the application to bring you an opportunity to come to Prime. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it as always, and we will talk to you next time.